Welcome, everyone, to the 18th Annual MIT Sloan CIO Symposium and the first digital edition. So unfortunately, something came up and Lena Smart is unable to join us today. Nevertheless, this is episode 3, Protecting Your Digital Innovations from Cyber Attack. So for roundtable discussion about cybersecurity, please come to the International Partners booth at 6:30 p.m. today, and we'll have a small roundtable discussion about this topic. Also, for questions, please use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You can chat amongst yourselves, but we won't be monitoring chat for questions. If you use social media, use hashtag MITCIO and join the community discussion. You can post in the 2021 Symposium program under the topic Digital Innovation. Now, today's moderator is Keri Pearlson. She is a cybersecurity expert who led a panel during the 2020 Digital Learning Series. She is a generous person with her time and advice and gave me a lot of good ideas for this program. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Keri Pearlson.
Hi, I'm Dr. Keri Pearlson. I'm the executive director of a research group at MIT called CAMS, Cybersecurity at MIT Sloan. We look at the organizational and managerial issues in cybersecurity. And I don't have to tell you that cybersecurity is a big concern. I'm sure many of you remember the Facebook breaches that occurred a few years ago, where 90 million people's information was found out there on the dark web. And maybe you even know that last week, 500 million Facebook users' information was posted on a hacking website. And maybe that's some of your information out there too. But maybe you didn't know about some of these other breaches. Last summer, while we were all trying to figure out the pandemic, both Honda and Jack Daniels faced a ransomware attack. Maybe you remember the Twitter hack where wealthy individuals like Bill Gates and Elon Musk account were hacked, and the bad guys offered those of us that saw those hacks $2,000 in Bitcoin if we would send them $1,000 in Bitcoin. Of course, if you sent the $1,000, you never saw the $2,000. And more recently, you might have heard about the hack of SolarWinds and the supply chain issues that raised, or maybe even the one that happened just recently with Microsoft, where at least 30,000 US organizations were left with a hole in their Microsoft email software. So we've seen a huge increase in cyber activity over the last year. Malware greatly increased during the pandemic. By one source, we found the statistic of 358% increase in malware attacks from 2019 to 2020. But ransomware also increased during that time, about 400%. Now, you might think, oh, well, I'm a small, medium business. I don't have to worry about this. The target are really the big guys, but that's just not true. According to the Verizon Data Breach Report, which is one of the foremost top reports that we look at to see the statistics and the trends in cyber, small businesses were the #1 target and represented 43% of all data breaches in 2019, simply because small businesses are usually less secure, maybe less concerned about security, and just don't believe they're a target. It's sort of like saying, I don't have to secure my house because the house down the street is bigger. The bad guys will break into the house down the street just because they can do more damage or get more assets. It's simply not true in the cyber world. Small and medium businesses are also targets. So recent supply chain attacks, like what I mentioned a moment ago, the SolarWinds attack, are really paradigm shifting events. The threat actors go after trusted vendors' product or their products to access your company. And what we saw in the SolarWinds case was as early as September 2019, a backdoor was installed in the software that SolarWinds uses to verify their product. And they had already certified their product when the bad guys inserted their malware. It affected something like 18,000 customers. And it turns out that the bad guys had targeted about 250 of those companies and used the backdoor that they had installed to target and then exploit these high visibility targets like Microsoft and Malwarebytes and several other companies. Now, supply chain attacks are not new. NotPetya was something that happened not too long ago and really brought down a lot of organizations. But you might even remember a few years ago when Target was, the superstore Target was a target of the bad guys, and they got in through their air conditioning vendor. So supply chain attacks are not new, but they seem to be ramped up an incredible amount right now, and therefore causing even more problems for organizations today. Most cybersecurity controls and tactics that are fundamentally used seem to be inadequate with these most recent attacks. And so doing more of what we've been doing every day is just not enough to stop the cybersecurity issues that we're seeing in our supply chain. We need new paradigms, and we need to strengthen the end-to-end digital product design process. So we've noticed that cybersecurity is more than just stealing credit card information today. It's really about disrupting your business with things like ransomware, or using your business to get to your customer system, like supply chain attacks. So the bad guys have upped their game, and frankly, we have to do the same to protect our digital assets. The COVID-19 pandemic has created what I call the perfect storm of fear, uncertainty, doubt, and chaos. And as we emerge from this pandemic, we have to figure out what our next new normal is going to look like. It's going to be different work arrangements. It's going to be different vendor arrangements. It might be different ways we interact with each other and our companies interact with other companies. And those are going to need new paradigms for keeping them secure. We know technology can't keep us 100% secure. We've seen that because we're still experiencing breaches. The fact that you don't see more breaches in your company is testament to how great your cybersecurity team already is. But you can't be 100% secure because we just don't know where the next breach or the next threat is going to come from. We also know that something like 90% of breaches are people related. Somebody in the company does something that they shouldn't have done, whether that's access an email, open up a phishing email that they shouldn't have opened up, or whether it's download a file that they shouldn't have downloaded, or possibly even given a password to somebody that they shouldn't have given the password to. So those are human errors that we think we can really start to conquer. But our supply chains are increasingly vulnerable, and our products and our services are, of course, our customers' supply chain. So anything we do in our company can affect the supply chain of those that are helping us stay in business. So in our research group at MIT, we asked the question, how can we use our cybersecurity culture model to help us design more secure products and services or offerings, And our research suggests that changing values, attitudes, and beliefs is the key to motivating product designers to build more secure products. So this is a brief model of our culture model that we use in our research group. It basically starts with the right-hand side with behaviors. We want to drive cybersecure behaviors. And in the case of product design and product development, we want our designers and our developers to design more secure products. We want the products to be as secure as possible right out of the gate. We believe that that kind of behavior is driven by the values, attitudes, and beliefs in the organization. If the designers believe cybersecurity is important, they're more likely to design cybersecurity into their products and services. If they have the attitude that their customers want to see cybersecure products, they're more likely to design cybersecure products. And those values, attitudes, and beliefs are driven by three things: external influences, things like what industry are you in, what kind of products are you designing. If you're doing something in the financial services environment, for example, there are all sorts of regulations and rules that you have to follow. And so those kinds of industries tend to have more values, attitudes, and beliefs around cybersecurity. Likewise, if you're in consumer products, it's not that cybersecurity is not important. It's just a different focus than healthcare, than perhaps industrial controls, where things could actually blow up if there was a cyber breach, or financial services where nobody wants to do business with a bank that they don't trust. We also think that values, attitudes, and beliefs are influenced by your supply chain. What do your customers want? And what are your suppliers supplying? If there's cybersecurity discussions and cybersecurity values, attitudes, and beliefs in your supply chain, then your designers are more likely to be thinking about cybersecurity when they design their products and services. And finally, this bottom box, which is probably the most important box for us today, are managerial mechanisms. Those are things that we can do as managers to drive value, attitudes, and beliefs around cybersecurity, which ultimately will drive behaviors. Those are things like setting up performance reviews that look at cybersecure designs, or things like communications programs and other kinds of activities that really drive home how important cybersecurity is. It could even be as simple as helping your designers have access to customers so that they can actually hear from customers how important cybersecurity can be. So when we did the research in this area, we talked to 3 very large global companies in 3 very different industries. And we looked at how they built their secure products and services. They were secure, but how did they get secure? And we noticed 4 different ways that cybersecurity is built into products and services. Perhaps at the lowest level, cybersecurity is just bolted on after the design is done, after the initial product is built, perhaps after the beta, during the beta test, when they find a cyber vulnerability, they go back and they redo the product. It's very expensive, and sometimes the solutions can't even be implemented and the product has to be scrapped altogether. Another way that happens is through what I'm calling level 2, where cybersecurity includes the design process includes a secure design process, a parallel process, where cybersecurity professionals work with the designers along the way and put gates in the process to make sure that the products are secure. Again, that works. We've seen secure products come out of that process. However, by the time the design gets to a certain point in the process, it might have to be redesigned just to incorporate the necessary security. Another way it's done, level 3, is by bringing experts or consultants into the actual design process. And those folks would be consulted with by the designers of the product so that they build in the right cybersecure components. However, these experts tend to not be 100% focused on the product at hand. They tend to have multiple products in their portfolio that they are advisors for. And therefore, it's also a bit more expensive than some of the other alternatives. But again, those are producing secure products and services. Really, where we think we want to go with this is we want to build for cybersecurity, or what I'm calling level 4, the highest level of maturity. I mean, we build products for manufacturability, we build them for usability, we build them for quality. Why aren't we also building them from the very beginning for cybersecurity? That's where we really think we want to go for product development to ensure that our products are cyber secure. So how do we get there? Well, our research isn't completely done, but we have a few insights so far, and they're shown on this screen here. One way we do that is to provide designers with more cybersecurity knowledge so that they feel more comfortable with making secure decisions from the very beginning of their designs. That doesn't mean they become cyber experts, but it doesn't mean that you just run them through a basic course with no real focus on how they're going to apply these ideas in their products and their designs. So we can educate our designers with a little bit more knowledge about security and the latest thinking about keeping products and services secure. We can build opportunities for the designers and the security team to interact more. Of course, as you strengthen these relationships and they have more discussions around cybersecurity and other things that have to do with their relationship, they're going to be transferring knowledge about how important it is to be secure. And as we've already talked about, changing the values, attitudes, and beliefs is really the important piece here. We want to instill in our designers the importance, the value of cybersecure designs. We want to find ways for designers to build cybersecurity to better understand what their customers want, and not just what the customers ask for, but what the customers really need and what's expected. Sometimes customers don't even know to ask for cybersecurity in their products. They assume that you've already built that in, and that's not necessarily the case. Over here, we also talk about making cybersecurity a higher priority. When our designers go to list all of the products, all of the features of their products, they tend to look at the features that will ensure the sale of their product or the usability of their product. And often cybersecurity features, while on the initial design wish list, don't make it past the initial cut because they have budget. They have to up somewhere. And so cybersecurity features are often something that could be thought of later on and are not included in the initial designs, are not fully fleshed out in the initial designs. But we really want as designers to build for cybersecurity from the very beginning. We can reward good design. One of the designers we talked to talked about how nobody in his organization is rewarded for good design or good cybersecurity. They're rewarded for good design. If they have an elegant design or an elegant product solution, that's rewarded, that's revered, that's talked about around the organization, but not because they did something that was super secure. So by building in some sort of reward system, even if it's as simple as bringing attention to good cyber designs, will change the values, attitudes, and beliefs. And finally, executive management and other senior managers have a big role to play. Just by talking about the importance of cybersecurity, you can change the way people think about cybersecurity in your organization. If they know it's your priority, it's going to become their priority also. So executives and leaders have an important role to play. Okay, so that's my talk for today. I'm from a group at MIT Sloan called CAMS, Cybersecurity MIT Sloan. And if you're interested in more information about our research, please feel free to go to our website shown on this slide, cams.mit.edu. And thank you for your time today. Okay, so we're now going to turn to the panel discussion. I have two really amazing panelists today. I want to let them introduce themselves, and we will jump into a discussion, pulling some of the threads from the talk that I just gave, but also talking about some of their issues around how do you keep your digital assets secure and your digital innovation secure from cyber attacks. So let's start with my panelists here, giving them a chance to introduce themselves. So Roota, do you want to take the microphone and introduce yourself and share with us today what you see as the biggest threat to your company as you try to protect your digital innovations from cyber attack?
Yes, hi. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Roota Almeida. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Delta Dental of New Jersey and Connecticut. And I've been in this industry for many, many years and working in different aspects of security. So today, Keri, that was a really, really good question. What I see is one of the top threats that we are seeing in the industries are the supply chain vulnerabilities. In the past few months, we have seen quite a few prominent breaches on various organizations where the hackers have leveraged supply chain vulnerabilities to get in. So in today's day, organizations like ours are relying more and more on their supply chain or on their third parties for their critical information processing. And this is making it even more important to manage the risks that are inherited in this process. At the end of the day, the data is still owned by my organization, and we are still liable to protect it. So every organization should have a robust third-party risk management program, I believe, to continuously assess and manage these risks that come with the third-party services. It is imperative to ensure that the third party that you're choosing to do business with is following the security protocols required by your organization, your standards that you and your policies that you have developed. And it's important to know how you are assessing that. That assessment cannot be point in time. It must be a continuous process. And it's not one size fits all. So not every third party you do business with is critical and process your critical information. So not every third party should be looked at by the same lens. However, in cases like Keri just mentioned, SolarWinds or Microsoft, as we have seen recently, we, the clients, we don't have control over our supply chains or third-party cyber preparedness. And that's where I believe our company's incident response capability and preparedness comes into the picture. And that's what matters at the end of the day, because there is nothing we can do to prevent it, but how soon can we bounce back and mitigate that threat or vulnerability becomes most important.
Great. I want to pull some of the threads you talked about with third-party risk and better incident response capability, but let me let Gabe first introduce himself and tell us about the biggest threat he sees for his company. Gabe, want to take the microphone?
Sure, absolutely. I'm Gabe Dimeglio, Vice President of Global Security Services at Rimini Street. I've been with Rimini for 10 years, in the industry for, well, over 20, like most of us. I actually really do concur fully with what Roota is saying here, in that, quite frankly, your biggest risk is the thing that you don't control, right? It really is that simple. The problem is that it is a much bigger problem than people realize. You don't know what's in the code of your suppliers, such as we obviously found with SolarWinds, for example. And having kind of a lack of visibility or really not the ability to have complete insight into what you're executing, what functions are occurring, and how that potentially could impact the organization is something that I think most organizations really struggle with. And I think they will continue to do so until there are some shifts in how we view the delivery and utilization of services and the corresponding data, if you will, that's interacted with there. I would say that I'm a big proponent of things that may not necessarily be the most popular opinion, but for example, I do believe that organizations should be able to do source code reviews of their solutions, if you will, that they're procuring, right? Whatever their suppliers are, and especially in the context of digital innovation or transformation, this is something that's supposed to make you competitive. It's a differentiator, right? It is something that's going to really drive the business. And if you don't really control all of the intricacies and complexities there and have very good insight into exactly what's being delivered to you and how and the controls around it, that is your big risk.
Great, thank you. Let's pull on this for just a minute about the supply chain concerns, because we know that our current paradigms are just not sufficient to protect us. I mean, as we saw with the recent attacks that penetrated SolarWinds and Microsoft, and then thousands and thousands of their customers. What do we need to do differently? We know doing more of the same is just not the right thing. What do we need to do differently? What are the new paradigms that we need to have? Roota, you had some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I believe the new paradigm here is joint responsibility. We all are part of the supply chain at some point, and our clients expect us to protect their data that they have entrusted us with. And it is our responsibility, like any third party, any other third party, to be able to demonstrate our commitment towards security of their data, and ensuring that we do our due diligence to protect their data. So this is not a matter of if, but when an incident or a breach could affect the business, and how good or bad that incident response is, and how you are communicating that effectively to your clients is very important. And the joint responsibility is, I believe, comes into picture. It is not only my responsibility to thoroughly vet the third party I'm planning to do business with, but it is also the third party's responsibility to ensure that they have proper security controls and are doing their due diligence. I believe they should also expect and monitor their third parties. And we are all in it together to fight the bad guys. And it is increasingly becoming more and more important to share that responsibility of protecting the data, not necessarily it's my data versus your data. And in case of a breach, we should be able to share information to avoid another company from being targeted. Even if they are your competitors, it shouldn't be, that they are my competitors, I'm not going to share my breach information. I don't care if they get hacked. I see that the ISACs are doing a great job with sharing of the information, especially the IOCs and other breach-related data. But it is still within their sectors, and it's not outside. Outside of an individual sector, there is still not that much collaboration, which I think is still a black box. So if the bad guys can get together, then why can't we and share that responsibility?
That's a really good point. I mean, we know that on the dark web, the bad guys are able to and do collaborate and work together often. In fact, one of the ways that the most common ways that attack vectors are launched these days is by some pretty much a business person with maybe questionable ethics going to the dark web and tinkering together all the components that they need in order to build an attack, whether it's a supply chain attack or whatever else. They're collaborating. What's getting in the way of this cross-sector collaboration, in your opinion? Why are we not sharing information more?
I believe that's because of our way of protecting our information. We don't want to share it with our competitors. We don't want to share our, it's not intellectual property. It's not that by sharing this information, you are going to affect your business in a negative way. It's actually sharing the information to fight against the bad actors together, to be able to get a holistic view of where the threats are coming from. And also, sometimes when you get another person's or another industry's perspective, it might open your eyes,
Yeah, I think the information sharing is a paradigm shift. So thank you for bringing that up. Let me turn to Gabe's comments for just a minute. Gabe, you were talking about source code reviews, and there's a lot of questions coming in on our Q&A line here about that. And I know when we talked before in preparation, you mentioned that you thought that was a paradigm shift. Talk a little bit more about what you see as the paradigm shift in terms of visibility into code, and what would that look like? And does that, one person is asking, does that imply that there's a benefit to open source software since it is out there for review? So let's talk about that paradigm shift for a minute.
Yeah, it does. I think that first off, regarding open source specifically, it creates a huge benefit because there's already a massive skills gap shortage in this industry. So most organizations don't have the ability to dedicate engineers to working with a specific vendor to sit in their lab with them, take a look at their code, run scan tools with them, dynamic or static analysis tools to identify any potential flaws, right? So it can be small things when it comes to proprietary software, just sharing the scan results so that people understand what the classes of weaknesses are that are applicable to that software so you can provide appropriate controls. To Roota's point specifically, shared responsibility is key, but also shared accountability, right? I do believe that if people are writing garbage code and they're just selling it to you, and their mission, as you say, is to reward their developers for creating great new functionality that's going to sell the product, not secure functionality that's going to protect the product, and they know this. That is something that should be appropriately addressed, probably through regulatory enforcement, because let's face it, nobody else has the ability to impact the way that organizations do that. But with taking open source code, and by the way, most of your enterprise software that you're running has a ton of open source libraries. And if you look at most Java applications, 80% of the code base actually is referencing back to public libraries. You should be analyzing those libraries. You should understand what's in them, but leveraging the open source community where you have this large volume of incredibly talented developers and engineers who know secure coding best practices and have the ability to identify these types of weaknesses within those libraries or products proactively gives you as a small business or even an enterprise business an advantage, because make no mistake, your enemies are doing the exact same thing. They're looking at this code. They're analyzing this stuff, trying to find those particular flaws and applicable weaknesses that they could further exploit.
So let's do one more round of supply chain questions, and then we'll move on to another topic. So, of course, both of you are in companies that you have customers. How do you make sure your customers feel protected from the vulnerabilities of your products? How do you deal with you're part of their supply chain? We've talked about your supply chain, who you work with, but your customers. How do you make sure your customers feel protected from the vulnerabilities in your products? Gabe, you want to start us out on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, like a lot of organizations, we have a very mature framework that we leverage, right? Essentially, I do fully believe in the power of an information security management system that is, I will say, fully endorsed, supported, and enforced from the board down, right? It's really about having a system in place where you can essentially continually evaluate risk, and I mean continual evaluation because new risks pop up, right? You want to identify them, select, implement, document, and properly manage the applicable controls to address that risk. And then it's literally like lather, rinse, repeat. But you have to have a framework that's going to enable you to manage requirements. And those requirements are going to be things like compliance requirements for your client base, which, by the way, is something that really hinders a lot of startups. If you think about it, mature programs have money, and mature organizations can spend dollars and dedicate resources to dealing with compliance requirements of their clients. Startups can't. So they do that, and then there's security suffers. But if you have a program in place where you can account for the business requirements, your business requirements, your client's requirements, regulatory requirements, and you can map out specifically what you're doing to address risk in that measurable methodology, then, and you can document within reason. There's obviously only so much information you can share with your client base, but you can document that, and you can share external certifications from independent third-party auditors against certified, like specific standards, like maybe ISO, for example. That actually does go a long way to help clients gain confidence in what you're doing.
Yeah, so somebody asked a question about that. Is there a UL-like cyber rating for systems? You mentioned one, ISO. Can you just talk a minute about that? What kinds of, ratings should people be looking for? We don't have any standard, well accepted across the industry rating like UL for electrical appliances, but there are other kinds of ratings. What do you see out there?
ISO is a great one. If you are an international organization, especially, leveraging the ISO 27001 framework is incredibly powerful. The 27002 specific controls, implementation guidelines, all that stuff. There's different standards that you can leverage, and by certifying your framework against the best matching standard that meets the needs of your business, that's going to enable you to more properly mature a program against best standards. But to me, the key is always don't overdo it. Don't document things as a part of a compliance program for a control where it's not required for that control. You may still do that thing, but the reason it's important to document against the requirements of these standards and leverage them to manage business objectives is because when you get to the point where there's a battle between what the business needs versus what a compliance program requires, when you've documented something you don't even need for that compliance requirement, that causes confusion and adds to further expense and complication in managing these programs. These programs are designed to simplify how you secure the business to meet its needs.
Great, thank you. Roota, let's go back to you. You're with Delta Dental, so your customers are both companies who, use your insurance or your services, but individuals like me. I happen to be a Delta Dental client. I'm sure many people on this webinar are. How do you make sure your customers feel protected from the vulnerabilities?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Gabe. To have a mature cybersecurity program, it's good for you to pick a framework and uh, have your cybersecurity program comply to that framework. And if you are going for certification, that's definitely something you can show to your clients and customers, that you are now compliant to a certain cybersecurity framework, whether it's ISO or NIST or high trust, which it's like a grade certificate, right? That you were asking about the grade. It's like a grade certificate that shows, hey, we have done and we got an A plus, or kind of something that you can show in the public. Apart from that, there is also a communication piece that is very important in case there is a breach. And in today's day, what clients are expecting is, yes, you have done your due diligence, but certain kind of breaches happen, like a third-party breach or something that you don't have control over. How are you effectively communicating with your clients? How are you responding in a timely fashion and ensuring that there is minimal impact, and you're providing your clients all the resources they need if they are affected by that breach? I think that puts your brand in a better perspective, and it keeps that trust with your clients. We have seen in the past where high profile breaches, some organizations have done an excellent job and have retained their brand value in spite of going through a massive breach. And we have seen also the other side of the coin, where they have not done that great a job and have lost a lot of customers, clients, and had to completely revamp their strategy and took quite a few years to get that trust back. So it's important how you communicate and ensure that in a timely fashion you give that message, you have that message across, that we are doing what we can, and we are there for you.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's move on to the post-COVID environment. Hopefully we're in post-COVID soon. We know that things are different today, and they're different than they were for just 6 months ago, and certainly different than 14 months ago, before we all moved home and started working remotely. How has the cybersecurity landscape changed due to the pandemic? Roota, you want to start us out? How has it changed due to the pandemic?
So before I go to the cybersecurity landscape, I'll talk about how it has changed the corporate workplace overnight, right? The companies that traditionally followed the face-to-face culture had to change overnight. They had to change the way they work overnight. And the landscape changed as the way of working changed, and more focused on enhancing and securing remote capability for those users to be able to work effectively happened. So the move changed from working in the office and protecting that internal environment changed into securing the remote capability. Also, the focus was on ensuring that the users can access their resources seamlessly without affecting their productivity or making them jump through hoops, so to speak. So at our organization, I'm very proud to say that our investment on enhancing our security posture and supporting remote work from a business process and security perspective in the past few years definitely paid off, when suddenly, like the rest of the world, we all went remote. And because of that, we did not have to drastically change the way we work in terms of security. What changed was the focus of security and operational goals did not change, but it shifted the acceleration, or it refined it. The back burner initiatives were ramped up. So, for example, we accelerated our identity and access and governance management strategy to ensure seamless and secure access for our users, regardless of the device they use or the application they were using, and of course, the physical location. We had to revisit and tweak some of our algorithms to support the new way of working to limit false positives and in turn save valuable time for my security team. And enhanced security monitoring and alerting was always on our list, which continues to be, and ensuring that team is not buried under false positives is a continuous goal. So I believe that while the overall strategy has not changed, it's just that one is accelerated as opposed to another.
Yeah, of course, it sounds like, identity and access management, certainly that's completely critical when everybody's remote. You don't have the same assurances of the people coming into your systems as you did when you had many or most of your employees being on-prem. So that makes a lot of sense. Gabe, how about you? How do you see the security landscape changing due to the pandemic?
Well, so we were lucky, right? When I built the Global Security Compliance Organization at Rimini Street, it was focused on building a remote workforce model, right? And we built offices all over the world. And we do have, a lot of employees who utilize those offices, but 90% of our workforce is a remote model. So we were already focused on all of the things that now everybody else is paying attention to, right? So what I've seen is that hundreds of clients have become more dependent on VPN, local device encryption and management, right? Also, a massive acceleration in the shift to the cloud for various services. And part of that is simply because the delivery and performance of those systems in cloud can actually make a lot of sense over the stuff that's still sitting in your data center. Again, from a functional perspective. I would say that SSO and MFA or any kind of identity and governance management where that fits within that mold has also grown a lot. I mean, frankly, you can just look at the market, how these cyber companies that offer these types of services or software vendors offering these services have grown, right, over this period of time. And that kind of speaks to itself as to what's happening there. But I do think that it's interesting that people have seen this as an opportunity. They've dealt with massive financial ramifications, right? Businesses have either been really negatively impacted, or in some cases positively impacted by this change due to the pandemic. And either way, what we're seeing is that people are taking that as an opportunity to rethink digital innovation and transformation. So you are starting to see more and more, people are migrating their service delivery from, internal services VPNing into, again, leveraging SSO and Okta to just go straight to a SaaS platform for those services. So it's kind of interesting. I don't think any of us foresaw the rapid need for change coming so soon. But one thing that did was it also made a lot of organizations rethink their programs from a business continuity perspective. What do we do when global changing events actually happen? And what you found was organizations that were accounting for these things in their cyber risk management systems were much better positioned. They had playbooks kind of ready to go. They just needed to figure out the logistical resources and sometimes financial resources in some cases, whereas organizations that didn't have those frameworks in place were completely lost and really struggled for a long time.
One of our attendees is asking about SIEM, Security Information and Management. Is that still relevant in the current cybersecurity landscape?
Since, good Lord, yes.
We're seeing, the things, they didn't keep us safe the last time around. Talk a little bit about that, Gabe.
Okay, so SIM is really about leveraging the information that you have in the organization around transactions, around logging and event behavior across a disparate group of controls. And it's about taking that information and basically ingesting it, aggregating it, and then being able to apply some type of correlative logic to it that's going to enable the business, right? And quite frankly, SIM alone feeds into ML in a lot of cases, right? There's a lot of things where we actually look at this stuff and we learn from these types of behaviors, and we can use that to make decisions. But I would say that SIM is more important than ever at this point in time, simply because there's been so many changes. And if you invest a little bit in being able to better find data, specific triggered events, if you will, because it shows up on a dashboard and your team can see it, right? And it doesn't get bundled into the false positives like what Roota was saying, right? If you control it, it can be a massive enabler for security response. And to Roota's point around responses when there's a breach, and I believe, again, it's an accountability issue, that the more accountable you are, the better. But having SIM does enable you to identify and respond to things faster if you leverage it properly. It also enables you to investigate deeper because you have forensic level details that you can actually, you know where to look for things and how to respond. So you decrease the impact of a potential incident as well, but you have to do it right.
Yeah, good. Thank you. So, Roota, I wanted to go back to one other question for you about the pandemic. What is your vision for how things are going to look 14 months from now? You know, we can't be 100% secure, and we don't want to be 0% secure. So we can't. How do you make that balance, and how are you preparing your company for, you know, a year from now when hopefully we're in the new normal? I wouldn't say we're back to normal, because I don't think we're ever going to be where we were 14 months ago again. But I don't think we're going to be where we are today either. So how do you think about that? And how do you balance this question somebody raised in the questions about risk versus security? How do you go about doing that? And what is your vision for that for, you know, a year from now for your company?
Yeah, so Keri, it's safe to say that large portions of the workforce will not return to a traditional office and traditional office hours post-pandemic, whenever that will happen, right? So ensuring that digitally we are prepared as more work will continue to stay remote is going to be our focus. We are not looking at removing any security controls. However, emphasis has changed in some areas. More emphasis on security awareness training while working remotely. Out of sight is out of mind for folks who don't live and breathe security like we do, right? So we continue to push that message forward across various channels. And while managing the information overload that our users have, we do not want important information about security to be buried underneath. So if the employee can't find what they need, it will hinder their productivity, and it will definitely put the security at risk. So we work on supporting changes in these working lifestyles and employee experience that enable employees to work more transparently while not compromising on security. As always, ensuring security controls do not hinder with business processes is on top of mind, right? Because if they have to jump hoops, they are going to try to find other ways to do it. So we are here to enable the business to function securely and not to be a roadblock. Also, prioritizing agility is another aspect to adapt, to be able to support the changing consumer and employee needs. This is an excellent time for any business to invest in agility, and an agile delivery model requires more continuous participation by the security team. With modern application development methods, how cybersecurity has a seat at the table when those discussions are conducted right from the beginning, and not the traditional way. You had talked about the different levels in your presentation, right? So it cannot be the traditional way at various checkpoints. We need to be at the it's very key that we are at the table from the very beginning and throughout that continuous process. And security teams must improve their understanding of the modern software development and the agile development dynamics and techniques to support that.
Yeah, I think that the changing the product development process is really critical. It sort of gets back to what both of you talked about earlier on about code being visible and about sharing information and being able to know that the code that your company is building and using, whether it's off-the-shelf software that you tinker together into some sort of application or something you're natively building, is really important here. Gabe, any thoughts from you about risk versus security? You can't be 100% secure, but you don't want to be 0% secure. How do
Information and digital asset classification and handling, right? It really comes down to you have to prioritize things. Obviously, there are some things that are not critical. Roota alluded to it earlier, actually directly said it, that there are just some things that are not that important from a supplier perspective. But it really comes down to, as a part of your risk assessment, your risk management process within a management system, right? You really want to understand and analyze and really have great details around what could the implications be if somebody were to compromise X, Y, Z. What business impact does that have? And frankly, as long as you do identify and classify those things appropriately, then yes, you can apply a select grade of controls that would be appropriate for that information or corresponding aspect. And then when you get into the things that are mission critical, this is obviously where people get into segmentation and much more advanced auditing and logging of events and behaviors. Some organizations are really buying into like zero trust models for everything, which is just, I hate to say it, it's ridiculous, right? I don't know anybody who has the amount of resources available to sit there and actually fully provision and monitor all of these things. And most of the team members that you have, most of the employees in an organization do want to be trusted. And frankly, you have to trust your IT operations team. So it's really an understanding of their behaviors, what motivates them to enable you to do that. But for those critical systems, yeah, maybe that's the place where you do have these enhanced controls. So to me, it really is just a matter of, for a given business, again, it's about enabling the business, like Roota said, you have to categorize, you have to understand what's applicable where, because I'm just telling you right now, if I go to our CEO, our board, and I'm like, hey, we need this $2 million tool and we're going to protect the whole enterprise with it, right? He's going to go, that's really cool. That's awesome. But $2 million, what about all the other initiatives and things we're doing? Whereas if I go and say, I need this $300,000 tool to protect these specific assets that are what differentiate how we deliver services and to keep those things secret, which one do you think is going to be met with less resistance?
Well, and you don't want to be on the line for the $2 million system that protects everything because you know that everything can't be protected. So there you go.
That's exactly right. That's it.
So we have a few minutes left, and there was one other topic that we talked about covering today about the skills shortage. Gabe, you mentioned it earlier about, and you've mentioned a couple times, you just don't have the resources to do these kinds of things. Root, I know you have experienced the skills shortage also, and by one estimate, there's something like 3 million open cyber positions today. So there're just not enough skilled people to fill them. We're working on that problem in CAMS. We're spinning up a boot camp ourselves, which hopefully will come out later this year for folks that want to transition into cyber, into entry-level jobs. But Gabe, how do you see companies addressing the skills shortages in their company? And then Root, I'll ask you how you're addressing it in your company. Gabe, why don't you start us out? How are people addressing
that? There are
that?
a lot of different approaches that I'm seeing here, just because it is so problematic. A lot of organizations are doing the same thing that I do, which is that if you find really smart people, right, technologists, for example, if it's going to be more of a technical function within cyber, as opposed to a business or function, which would be more compliance related, right? So if I'm looking for technical people, I need people that have these really powerful core capabilities that have demonstrated that they can learn really complex things. More than anything else, I look for somebody who's passionate, who wants to learn more, someone who's driven and just absolutely curious. So when I'm recruiting for positions, I find those technical chops and basically say, look, we'll teach you, we will teach you the cyber side, we'll bring you into this and then just put you into really a complex program. But the way I know if they're going to be the right fit is, basically I just start sending them down rabbit holes during the interviewing process, and immediately 9 out of 10 candidates are just gone, right? It's the ones who all of a sudden have time and they come back and they're asking good questions because they dug into these things and they're curious and they want to know more. And hey, what else can you show me here real quick? Those are the people that immediately I'm going to prioritize. So it is about building those skill sets. I tell people all the time, we do third-party maintenance and support for Oracle and SAP products. I can teach an Oracle person security, like no problem. I cannot teach a security person Oracle, like in under 2 decades.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So Roota, in your case, how do you feel this skills shortage in your company? What do you do? How do you make sure you have enough resource?
So one of the things that we started doing a few years ago was to start an internship program for graduating high school seniors, because as part of other initiatives that I work on outside of Delta Dental to promote cybersecurity in the community, I realized that there are not enough resources within the school environment that are provided to these students to actually go ahead and pursue cybersecurity courses in colleges. So they are not even seeing it as an alternative to take, as an option. So we decided to do something about it and started this internship program where we can give them a window to a corporate cybersecurity program and develop interest in their minds, and hope that they go ahead, take cybersecurity courses, learn about cybersecurity, and come back in the environment and help protect organizations like us. So that's a little bit a drop in the bucket, as Keri, you and I had talked about earlier. So that's something a little bit that we want to do to encourage more people who might not know about it, right? There are several aspects of skills, why we have skills shortage. And one of them is either they don't know about it or they don't have the resources to go and learn. So we try to do our bit.
Great, thank you. So I want to ask you my favorite last question, but I have to ask you to answer it in 30 seconds because we have to turn the microphone back over to Alan in about 1 minute. What is the one thing you want our audience to leave with today? If our audience are mostly CIOs, what's the one thing you want them to leave with from our discussion today? So Roota, what's one thing you want people to leave with today?
So I'll just say one sentence. Be the culture change you would like to promote, and think before you click.
Perfect. Thank you. That's 2 good things. Gabe, how about you?
I love that. I'm going to be a little bit more complicated. When it comes to being on the CIO side or the executive leadership side, it really is what do you have as an organization that somebody else wants to monetize? Right? It could be your secret sauce. It could be your product, what differentiates you. It could be public records. But in essence, think about what's easy to monetize, what somebody would be motivated to monetize. And that's where you want to kind of focus and prioritize how you're applying controls to some of these areas. And then finally, I would say that more than anything else, think about the future. What we've learned over the last several years is how powerful misinformation campaigns can be. And we've seen this all throughout history. It's not particularly new. But what I do expect to happen is that people are going to weaponize those programs, not just for national influence, other nations, whatever, but specifically to target individuals that will modify their behavior in such a way that they would do something they previously wouldn't consider. So it's the threat that you're going to see from a risk perspective is going to evolve into internal spies in the future.
Okay, we are out of time. I know we didn't get to a lot of questions, but I want to thank both Gabe and Roota for joining me today. Alan, the microphone is yours.
Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone, for a really insightful discussion. Thanks to Keri, Roota, and Gabe. I really enjoyed it. For all the audience, let's continue the conversation. Please post your thoughts in the 2021 Symposium program under this week's theme, Digital Innovation. You can also come to a roundtable discussion about cybersecurity this evening in the International Partners booth at 6:30 and get your own thoughts in on the topic. Join us tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Abby Lundberg will lead a panel on rapid shift in talent and knowledge acquisition. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. Replays will be posted in the 2021 Symposium program agenda as soon as we're able. That's it for now. Bye-bye, everyone.